Well, there's been a sensational murder in Seminole County, and it reads almost like a cartel hit. We're going to tell you all about that. Plus, we're going to update you on the Chad Daybell trial. This and more on this episode of Charlie Crimebuster, what some people are calling, well, the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals interviewed or participating and do not represent those of Charlie Crimebuster nor Peacemaker Network. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Charlie Crimebuster. Sure glad to have you aboard the crime train today. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate the thousands of downloads that we experience with this podcast. Well, today, boy, it is a doozy. We're talking about, well, it almost seems like the cartel set up shop in Seminole County. But watch out, watch out. Law enforcement doesn't play in Seminole County and in the state of Florida. They're going to nab the perpetrators. We'll tell you all about that and update you again on the Chad Daybell trial that's already in focus and taking place right now. But first, let me encourage you to reach out with a shout out. You can reach me, Charlie Crimebuster, at gmail.com. That's Charlie Crimebuster at gmail.com. And if you have suggestions, or perhaps you have questions, or maybe you want to launch an objection, it is a safe space. Also, let me remind you, if you'd like to support the program, go on over to peacemakernetwork.com, peacemakernetwork.com. There you can become a badge, BADGE supporter. You can help support the men and women of law enforcement, the military, and the first responders. That is peacemakernetwork.com. By the way, we've also launched a YouTube channel now. We would love for you to get caught up on these episodes. You see, we kind of recap them through the week. You can just search Charlie Crimebuster True Crime Talk on YouTube. You should find us right there. We'll make it easy for you. We'll even put it in the show notes. So that's a little housekeeping to get out of the way. Let's talk about what's really happening now with a true crime story. This true crime story is fresh, it's mysterious, and it is deadly. Then, of course, we're going to update you again on that triple murder trial of Chad Daybell. Now, danger struck at Central Florida, well, right at a Central Florida red light. You see, that is where Alta Garcia de Agvias was ambushed, carjacked, later shot to death. Her body left in her burning car. It began this past April 11th when Catherine had driven from South Florida, from an area that's called Homestead, on her way to a home here in Central Florida near Castleberry. That's when she was ambushed at a red light near Winter Springs, Florida. Ambushed by a masked man with a semi-automatic rifle. She was carjacked, taken to a construction site in Osceola County. That, by the way, is just south of Orlando. And there, her body was found in her burned-out vehicle. You see, what made this more interesting was that the carjacking was actually filmed. That's right, filmed, and a video circulated that was taken by a witness. Now, you all know that we have cameras all over the place now, and crimes are constantly reminding us with these videos that these can be dangerous times. Now, this story has all the making of a blockbuster movie, at very least a Lifetime movie. There is a winding trail of drugs, money, and even murder. And, get this, add to that the arrest of an Orange County deputy sheriff. Yep, it's a story for sure. Now, this past Wednesday, it was revealed that Torres Garcia, you see, he met with an unidentified person just before the carjacking. He was given an AR-15 and $1,500 to deliver Catherine somewhere that is not yet made public. Now, there have been almost 5 arrests in the case, though only 2 of them have actually been charged with carjacking resulting in death. Now, keep in mind, the carjacking happened in Seminole County here in Central Florida. That's just north of Orlando for those not familiar with the area. To get you up to speed, let me share with you some information about the victim in the carjacking shooting. She is Alta Garcia Agavias, a.k.a. Catherine. She's 31 years of age and is from Homestead. Now, Homestead is a city in Miami-Dade County, about 40 miles south of Miami. Hey, interesting enough, I drove approximately this same route she did just a couple of days ago now. Now, there is some speculation as why she was driving here from Central Florida, or to Central Florida from Homestead, Florida. At first, her husband told law enforcement, well, she was just supposed to be driving here to visit family. However, no such family members were found in the area. Now, law enforcement did find 2 relatives. However, after making contact with them, well, neither of those relatives were expecting her. Now, the sheriff here in Seminole County, a great guy by the name of Dennis Lima, he had actually said that her brother, a guy by the name of Lewis, had told law enforcement that she was in town, now get this, to give, quote, money and other stuff to someone. Yeah. In case you haven't figured that out, that's code words for money and drugs. As the sheriff said, this is all about drugs and money. Now, law enforcement believes that she was on the way to see a guy by the name of Giovanni Hernandez. You see, he was the last person to have spoken to Catherine. He, by the way, has been arrested on, well, unrelated drug charges. Now, in the video, someone is seen getting out of a green Acura. That guy was the carjacker. And investigators, through, I think, brilliant detective work. But let me remind you, by the way, in today's crime fighting, well, people do leave a digital footprint. And it's not very smart to, well, wear the same clothes on Facebook that you use to carjack a car. See, kind of defeats the wearing of a mask, don't you think? So it's clear now that the man getting out of the vehicle, they've been able to trace that down to a guy by the name of Jordan Garcia. Jordan Torres Garcia. You see, he was linked to the crime when cops learned that he had a connection to that green Acura that was seen on that video. It was following Catherine's car. It was bumping into the car. And so that's the way they connected this guy. So it's apparent now that the cops have the alleged carjacker that carjacked Catherine with a weapon. But what about the driver? What about others that were involved in this crime? And what about another murder? Yep, another murder tied to this case. Well, we're going to get to all that in a moment. Right now, it's time for us to take a moment to share with you what we call our Crazy Crook Story of the Week. You see, we always tell a crazy crook story to kind of lighten the load, we always say every week. And, my friend, now it is time for Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Now, it does not take a rocket scientist to understand who our crazy crook is today, right? Yep, it's the prime suspect, the one who's already been arrested. The same guy, my friend, who took $1,500, allegedly, and a AR-15 rifle, and went out to carjack somebody in plain daylight. Yep, plain daylight where people have cameras. Takes the time to put a mask to hide his face. But is such an idiot that he wears the same clothes that he has, now, wait for it, on his very own profile on Facebook, along with ties to a green Acura. By the way, if it's not crazy enough, he used the same vehicle that was already known to be tied to another murder in the area, that of a tow truck driver. Yep. My friend, here he is, Jordan, our suspect. Well, he is indeed Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Now, it's not too often that we actually feature the Crazy Crook as the suspect, but we had no choice to do so this week because this guy's so stupid that he wore the same clothes that he had on his Facebook profile. Now, we told you about the gun-toting rifle, a guy, waving thug that took Catherine by gunpoint. But who was driving that vehicle? And who else participated in this carjacking that resulted in murder? Well, the other thug allegedly involved, his name was Kevin Justino. We're going to call him, well, we'll just call him Kevin right now. He was arrested Monday, actually by marshals in Puerto Rico, in charges unrelated to the carjacking case. Now, he is facing charges there of possession of automatic weapon and drug trafficking. That's what Sheriff Lima said. He, of course, is extradited to Central Florida, where he's going to now face charges in the Middle District of Florida related to this carjacking. Now, how did we get to him? Well, he was linked to the case by another car, a red Toyota Corolla. That was seen driving in the same apartment complex where the green Acura was seen behind and actually, bumping into Catherine's SUV on the day of the carjacking. You see, it was spotted, that green Acura, by the way, was only one of 3 in the state, and the other 2 had already been salvaged, so it wasn't too hard of a push to find out that green Acura was the one. But now the red Toyota Corolla, you see, that was seen, it came back to a relative, and we're going to call him Juno. It came back to a relative of Juno, and he's been on Seminole County Sheriff's Office radar ever since that moment. You see, surveillance showed that red Corolla. Well, they found it connected to the green Acura because it was found picking up the occupants of the green Acura. You see, they appeared to be cleaning up the car, wiping it down of prints. Talk about consciousness of guilt. Doesn't get any more consciousness than that, right? That's what Sheriff Lima said. Now, additionally, records came in that put Juno at the carjacking scene. You see, there's that other thing that you and I carry around. Yep, you guessed it already. It's called the cell phone, right? And they were able to trace both of those guys to the carjacking scene that way. So it's just very apparent that Juno, he is the driver, I believe, by far the driver, allegedly driver of the green Acura at the time of the carjacking. Now, Sheriff Lima, he also said, by the way, he's a great sheriff here in Seminole County. Sheriff Lima said it's also possible that other people were inside that green Acura at the time of the carjacking. But all that's going to be determined as the investigation continues to evolve. Now, there was also another arrest. Well, it is related to the case. That is a guy by the name of, Cavani Hernandez. You see, he's in custody in Seminole County for drug possession and trafficking charges. He had turned himself in. Now, Sheriff Lima said that Cavani, he's not right yet charged related to the actual carjacking. And it is important to note that no kidnapping charges have been filed. Only charges related to the act of carjacking are on the table. But now, Crespo Hernandez, he was named as a person of interest in the case. You see, that was after detectives discovered that Cavani had spoken to Catherine by the way of FaceTime. That's on the very day of the carjacking. You see, it appears that, Catherine's brother, Louis, who was concerned, he kind of began his own investigation into the carjacking and death of his sister. He had pointed this out to detectives on his own accord. He said Catherine was actually there again to give money and other stuff to someone. But at that time, the details around the delivery was a little unclear. But now, Sheriff Lima says that he believes that Catherine was on her way, to visit Cavani at his own home in Castleberry. Now, detectives were able to determine that using the GPS route that Catherine took from South to Central Florida. You see, everybody that knows this case, according to the sheriff, knows it's about drugs and money. So they went ahead and raided Cavani's house, and guess what? Surprise, surprise, surprise. They found drugs and money. And by the way, as the plot thickens, as you say, we now know that Louis and Catherine's husband, Miguel, they're no longer really cooperating with detectives. My friend, there's still a lot of unanswered questions to this violent occurrence that occurred on our streets right here in Central Florida. But I got to tell you, law enforcement, well, they worked fast and furious to get these dangerous men off the street. With their law enforcement skills and even the cooperation of other jurisdictions. You see, it was even Pasco County Sheriff's Office. They provided a unique facial software to nail down these suspects. You see, my friend, that's why I love living in this state. Some of the greatest lawmen on the face of the earth work here to protect us. Oh, we have several colorful and dynamic sheriffs who believe in fighting crime and not just standing by and allowing the bad guys to get away with their crime sprees. Now, there are a lot yet of questions that need to be answered. For instance, with this dangerous duo, who did the shooting? Who did the killing of Catherine? And that same vehicle, that green Acura, it was also linked to the killing of a tow truck driver. What was that all about? Who did that killing and why? Well, we're going to work with you to get all the answers to this and more in the days ahead. And by the way, let me remind you again, you can go to our YouTube channel to get up to date. Each Tuesday, we produce Charlie's True Crime Talk. There we follow up on the previous episode and we update you. You can search Charlie Crimebuster True Crime on YouTube. Or better yet, we're going to leave you a link right in the show notes so you can stay updated and informed. All right, now we also promise we're going to get you up to date on the Chad Daybell triple murder case. And we're going to do that in just a moment. But right now, it is time for us to share with you Charlie's Scam Alert of the Week. So my friend, here is James Buckman, our producer, with this week's Scam Alert. Take it away, James.
Thank you, Charlie Crimebuster. Today's Scam Alert comes courtesy of Ready.gov, and this week we're going to be sharing information with you about cyber attacks and how to avoid them. You see, cyber attacks are malicious attempts to access or even damage a computer or network system, and they can lead to the loss of money or the theft of personal, financial, and medical information, and these attacks can damage your reputation and your safety. Cybersecurity, on the other hand, involves preventing, detecting, and responding to those cyber attacks that can have wide-ranging effects on individuals, organizations, the community, and our nation. You see, cyber attacks can occur in many ways, including accessing your personal computers, your mobile phones, gaming systems, and other internet and Bluetooth-connected devices. They can even damage your financial security, including identity theft. They can even block access or even delete personal information and accounts from you. And they can also complicate your employment or your business services. But you can avoid cyber risks by taking the following steps. Number 1, limit your personal information that you share online. Change privacy settings and do not use location features. Number 2, keep software applications and operating systems up to date. Number 3, create strong passwords by using upper and lowercase letters, numbers, and special characters, and even use a password manager that uses 2 methods of verification. Number 4, protect your home and or your business using a secure internet connection and Wi-Fi network, and change the passwords on those devices on a regular basis. Number 5, don't share your PINs or your passwords. And when possible, use devices that use biometric scans, for example, a fingerprint scanner or a facial recognition. And number 6, check your account statements and credit reports regularly. And number 7, be cautious about sharing personal financial information such as your bank account number, or social security number, or credit card numbers. And only share personal information on secure websites that begin with HTTPS for secure. Number 8, back up your files regularly and save them on a separate storage device. Number 9, do not click on links in texts or emails from people that you don't know. You see, scammers are known to kind of create fake links to unsafe websites. And number 10, remember this. The government will not call, text, or contact you by way of social media about owing money. And finally, number 11, watch for suspicious activity that asks you to do something right away or offers something that sounds too good to be true or needs your personal information. Think before you click. But when in doubt, do not click. At Charlie Crimebuster, we strive to keep you safe.
Thank you, James. Now, this past week, the Daybell Jet case Well, it's brought a whole bunch of witnesses to the stand. They have included, but not limited to, a realtor, a bishop, school officials, and cops, and even a forensic accountant. Now, these witnesses in these past weeks have brought color to, quote, unquote, the alternate reality that Chad built for himself. You see that alternate reality deal? That was a term used by the prosecutors in the opening statements. And they said that Chad built this alternate reality to fill his desire, for sex, money, and power. By the way, there was even a funeral director who was called to the stand in this whole host of witnesses that we've been seeing in the trial thus far. His name was Stephen Schultz. He was a former neighbor. He also worked as a funeral director. He actually described to jurors that he drove to Daybell's Salem, Idaho home to bring Tammy Daybell's body to Utah for the funeral in Springville. He had invited Tammy Daybell's brother-in-law, Jason, to come for the drive as well. Now, Schultz told Chad Daybell that he would be honored to make that trip. He actually said the Daybells were a solid rock in our community. He said, quote, I thought highly of all of them. But by the time Schultz left the Daybell home, he did have his concerns. He told jurors that the coroner had not ordered an autopsy, and Chad Daybell voiced he did not want an autopsy, even when Schultz suggested it might be useful for the children to see the results, because they could have inherited the same medical issues. He said typically people that young don't usually die suddenly. You see, Tammy Daybell was only 49 years of age. Now, Schultz also said that Daybell told him he wanted to hold the funeral just as quickly as he could, saying, I don't want to drag this thing out. Now, those things which he said, well, it always made him, combined with other red flags, he said, it made him wary. Things he heard from the family about Daybell's religious beliefs, it made him question whether there was suspicious circumstances. Now, he said he did not see at that point anything suspicious on Tammy Daybell's body when he looked, but yet he said his concerns were significant enough that he actually brought them up to Tammy Daybell's relative who was driving with him, and he said, quote, unquote, something wasn't setting well with me. Now, there was also a realtor that testified this week about how Chad Daybell wanted to put a modular home on the property. Now, remember, the kids, they were found buried on the property. And you and I both know this was a way to additionally conceal their graves. Now, Chad had told the realtor that he wanted somewhere for him and Lori to live when she got out of jail. Yeah, sure. As though he thought she would really get out of jail. Methinks, hey, do you like that phrase, methinks? Hey, maybe that could be a catchphrase for Charlie Crimebuster. What do you think? Does it sound good on me, methinks? Well, methinks that the inquiry and how fast you could get a modular home on the property, I believe it's just a way to hide the graves of the two precious children that were killed. I believe that will also get into the jury's mind, by the way, because you see, that connects the fact that Chad knew exactly what happened to the children. Despite how the defense attorney for Chad is attempting to distance Chad from Lori and the spiritual hitman Alex Cox, things like this brings him right into focus, don't you think? Now, all these witnesses that were called to the stand rather quickly, of all these witnesses, I believe the most important, the key witness in this trial, in my opinion, is Melanie Gibb. In fact, when she testified during the trial, it was actually described by a lot of journalists as a quote-unquote explosive day in Chad Daybell's murder trial. Remember Melanie Gibb? Remember now, she was in the inner circle of these people. She was important enough that the defense attorney, spent more time on cross on her than any other witness. You see, again, she was the inner circle in that inner circle. She probably spent the most time with Lori than of all the witnesses. She was there when Lori and Chad first met. She knew Lori even before they met. And she knew the inner workings of this so-called doomsday cult. Was actually a part of that cult, however, not linked to any of these murders, thankfully. But she did have first-hand information regarding the affair of Lori and Chad. And perhaps she was one of the only and last witness, other than the perpetrators, to see little JJ alive. She knew all about the relationship between Lori and Tylee. Now, Gibb, when she was on the stand, she testified that Lori and Chad both believed that you can come back to this world many times. You see, Lori believed that she and Chad had been married in a past life, was sealed by Jesus Christ. And Gibb's testimony continued to get into all the details into this belief that, well, that Chad and Lori were in charge of a group of 144,000 people, all waiting for the end of time, the second coming of Christ. Now, Gibb also detailed something very interesting. She talked about the scale of light and dark that this doomsday couple used to assess people. You see, light people, well, they were said to be in contract with the Savior. And dark people, they believed, were in contract with Satan. The way people are tied to good and evil. The testimony then kind of shifted to discuss Charles Vallow, who was killed by Lori's spiritual hitman. Gibbs said that Chad had told Lori that Charles had been taken over by an evil spirit in January of 2019, and that Lori definitely believed him. Now, Gibb also described something called castings. Yep, castings. A casting that began as a prayer. Well, it was used to cast evil spirits out of someone. Gibb had even said that she participated in a casting with Lori back in early 2019 to get rid of Charles. Well, actually, to rid Charles of his evil spirit. Get rid of the evil spirit in Charles. She also said that multiple castings were performed, for Charles, though Chad was only present at one of them. She also testified that Lori believed that Brandon Bordock and Tylee were also dark, part of the family. Remember Brandon? Someone attempted to murder him. We now know that that was Alex Cox. So that was an attempted murder. Thank goodness Alex Cox wasn't a good shot, or Brandon probably would be one of these victims as well. Well, when it's all said and done, I believe that Melanie Gibb, she probably gave the most helpful information to law enforcement to understand this crazy doomsday couple and the dangers and violence that it brought to others. So rest assured, there would be there was an intense cross-examination of this lady by the name of Melanie Gibb. Well, the defense, they attacked her memory, said several times that her memory wasn't really good. And they really attacked and probably got some points to the fact that she at first had lied to the police when Lori and Chad asked her to say that she had little JJ. Now, other than that, I believe that Melanie was a credible witness for the prosecution. Yep, I believe she was very credible. So the trial is now ongoing, and the big question in my mind, it's not whether the jury's going to find him guilty. I would be shocked if they did not. But the real question is, will Chad Daybell get the death penalty? You see, in my mind, there's no way that this jury cannot see that Chad is involved in the deaths and that he covered up those crimes. Now, the defense attorney, he's trying to distance him from that, trying to say that Chad was just duped, and that Alex Cox was her protective brother and that he was the one, he and Lori, responsible for all these deaths. But you just cannot, a reasonable person cannot believe that Chad was not in the middle of all of this. He may have tried to deny it in his mind, but he's right there front and center, both he and Lori, well, I believe they use Alex as their own spiritual hitman, and justified these terrible murders with this alternate reality that they both created so that they could be together and even get money and power. Well, lots more stuff to come from both the Seminole County carjacking murders and the triple murder trial of Chad Daybell. Hey, my friend, don't forget to join us on our YouTube channel as we update both these cases every week. On Tuesday night, we do an update. You're going to find even more information that you didn't get on this podcast today, because we'll have more information to share. And by the way, you could go to YouTube, just search Charlie Crimebuster True Crime Talk, or better yet, just go to the show notes. We're going to have a link. Very easy for you to get there. So until this time next time, when we're going to come back again on the sensational Seminole County carjacking murder and the updates on the triple murder charges against Chad Daybell. So until this time next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster here reminding you, be safe, be alert. Yep, for the life you save, it may be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. You can find additional podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. You can also support our first responders, military, and law enforcement communities at peacemakernetwork.com, or subscribe to our YouTube channel using tag @CharlieCrimebuster. Even visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/CharlieCrimebuster. Or if you would like to make suggestions for future podcasts, please send your ideas to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us next week for another exciting crime story with Charlie Crimebuster.